One of the seven wonders of the ancient world, the Pyramid of Giza, has remained an enigma even to pyramidologists. Scholars have devoted their life to the studies of this enigma, but few have been able to unravel the mystery behind the building of this edifice. The mystery of the mathematical precision of its dimensions, and the fact that this is being discovered at this time shows even the accuracy of its own predictions, like Nostradamus, who predicted his own death and the date when his body will be exhumed and transferred to a different grave. Unfortunately, the full implication of the pyramid and its prophecies must continue to be an enigma as long as the fundamental issues are neglected. Through the Grail message, enlightenment also came to mankind on the significance of this work. The pyramid was built about 6,500 years ago, 2,500 years before the destruction of Troy, which coincided with the era of Abraham, 4,500 years BCE, and 3,000 years before Moses. It was built about 5,500 years after the sinking of Atlantis. In my earlier write-up about Atlantis, I indicated that the real Atlanteans, or the Ararians, all perished when Atlantis sank, and made up what today we describe as the Aryan race in their further incarnations. Many may have been part of the then home of knowledge in Chaldea, the then world center of knowledge. And it was in Chaldea that the Pyramid of Giza was conceptualized. Clairvoyants and mediums of very high repute were able to see the replica of the pyramid in the beyond, and were commissioned to wait for the master builder who will translate it to the material world. And this master builder was to be found in Arabia. His name was Pyramon. Pyramon journeyed to Chaldea because he has been told by the wise men in Arabia, who studied under Sargon the priest-king of Chaldea, whose name was Magog, that his life work lies in going to the land of the wise men to receive instructions on the building of a prophetic monument on earth, which will be an earthly imitation of the pyramid that exists at the source of creations. The one at the summit of creations is a diamond crystal subsumed by flames. There he was presented with the model of the pyramid which he has often seen in his dreams. He was told that the giants will only work with him or no one else, and that the pyramid will be the last work that the giants will do in collaboration with human beings. Perhaps it is necessary to explain who the giants are. To explain that would entail going into mythology, at least to bring out the basic remnants of knowledge that has been transmitted to us through fables and myth. For example, we know through the Greek mythology that there was an Atlas that held the sky at the summit of the Atlas Mountains. And we also know through the Greeks that there were gods who interact with human beings. But what may sound strange to people is that these so-called gods are still in existence today, and that some human beings still interact with them because they see them. Of more recent controversies is the fact that some people, like the famous author of Sherlock Holmes' series of detective works, were able to see these and documented their interaction with gnomes. Among this group of beings are giants. These giants have their field of activity, not in the ethereal plane, but in the medium gross matter, generally known as the astral plane by mystical pseudoscience. They also have the ability to work at the various intermediate planes between the astral plane and the physical world. That was why it was possible for people to see them with particularly sensitive physical eyes. That was also why they can work directly on the physical world at the same time as the astral world, also having their influence in the ethereal. They worked with Halfda millions of years ago, with Ororan in Atlantis 12,000 years ago, and were the guardians of the treasures of Ahura Mazda's ruined palace in Iran. But their last active collaboration with human beings was during the construction of the Great Pyramid. They are called the giants because of their great size. This ought to be differentiated from those giant beings whose duties are the protection of places of worship. The exact position of the pyramid was carefully selected. It is meant to be at the center of the world, 90 degrees east of the Bermuda Triangle. And this center was not in Chaldea, not in Arabia, but in Egypt. Today it can be identified at the exact intersection point between longitude 30 degrees east and latitude 30 degrees north. Initially this was meant to be the intersection between latitude 0 degree and longitude 0 degrees. But the use of modern units changed all that, coupled with the fact that the Earth has been changing in its orbital position due to increasing rigidity resulting from dark ethereal clouds. It is separated from the Bermuda Triangle by 90 degrees. On being instructed by Sargon the priest-king of Chaldea, Gum-Kolba, a hoary old man of over 200 years of age, and who looked far younger, was assigned to instruct him using a model that was already constructed for the purpose. Pyramon had later to build another model all by himself to acquaint himself of the difficulties and challenges involved. At this time, Tishbe, a teenager who was linked to Pyramon with a supra-earthly bond of love, came to Chaldea from Arabia and was briefly with him before he left for Akheru in Egypt. Tishbe's job was to help fight the Luciferian religious cults that demand for the glorification of the female body, killings and falsehood for its sustenance. She later went to meet Pyramon in Egypt and was able to prevent him from being poisoned a second time by one of the priestesses of the new god, Septu, also known as Lucifer or Baal. Priestesses of this god had once attempted to murder Pyramon through poison to prevent him from completing the pyramid. They all but succeeded, and Pyramon was in coma for several weeks. All the healers of Akheru did everything they know of but to no avail, hence they had no option but to appeal to the elemental lord of healing and medicine to personally intervene. Aesculapius heeded their request and came by himself. His lower subordinates, the gods of thunder and lightning, displayed in the announcement of his coming, and he came and was able to unite Pyramon back to his body. About 500 years later, when Lucifer succeeded in taking over the control of pharaohs as their guide and advisor, he was known as Re or Ra. Lucifer, of course, was not seen personally by these pharaohs but his emanations. At that time, he was sending messages to the people through his priestesses in the name of the Lord of the Sun. The being in charge of the sun is masculine while those in charge of the moon and the earth are female respectively. Thus the much-touted word Mother-Father Earth is an aberration. The spiritual bond between Pyramon and Tishbe was a very strong one and later resulted in the fable of a tragic love affair between Pyramus and Tishbe that ended in double suicide. Only a vague recollection of the truth sufficed for this. Before the appearance of Pyramon, the giants were already busy gathering the stones and cutting them to shape for the construction. They brought the stones from far and wide through the process that today may be called the process of apportation. Today, discarnate entities are able to move objects from far distances in the presence of a medium, activities which some so-called magicians utilize to mesmerize their audience. Pyramon concentrated on the pyramid while some others, including one who, 3,700 years later would be reincarnated in Israel as Isaiah, handled the Sphinx. The significance of the pyramid. The pyramid is called prophecy on stone, and rightly so. The reason why it was built was to warn about the last judgment that will befall mankind 6,500 years after it was built. Each single stone placed there has significance. Distances represent historical time. Let us examine in broad outline the significance of certain features of the pyramid. The Queen's Chamber is an indication that there will be a female envoy from the luminous heavens. This envoy is already known in ancient times. In most places, temples are built in honor of Isis, the goddess of love. This happens to be an elemental being that swings in the radiation of this envoy, just as Astarte is a being that swings in the radiation of the Queen of Purity. She is the first to be incarnated in the world of matter. Calculations show that he will be around 2,500 years from the construction of the pyramid, i.e., 2,000 years BCE. She came around the modern-day western border of Turkey, called Troy at that time. Her activities as Cassandra were mentioned in the Iliad of Homer. Homer himself was only relieving far memory as he may have been around during the destruction of Troy. Her death coincided with the destruction of Troy because none of her warnings was heeded. She died in an enclosed room. The part that leads to the chamber indicates a bifurcation where a part heads downwards to the abyss. It signifies that a part of mankind will not be heading for the luminous heights but to the abyss. The enclosed chambers signify two things, that she will die in an enclosed chamber and that all her warnings will not be heeded. This was fulfilled in the activities of Cassandra in Troy that died in an enclosed room due to the machinations of Clytemnestra, Agamemnon's estranged queen. At her death in Troy, a great earthquake happened at the pyramid around 2000 BCE. The first envoy that came was during the time of Moses, 500 years after the death of Cassandra. In fact, many that failed in their duties during the time of Troy reincarnated within that time to redeem themselves by service to the Light Envoy. He had his kingdom in Sudan and was the power behind the activities of Moses. He was murdered just when Moses was taking the Israelites out of Egypt by agents of Pharaoh Ramses II. The death resulted in a second earthquake at the pyramid, few days before Moses parted the Red Sea for the Israelites to pass. This was represented by the airy chamber. The second airy chamber represents the coming of Jesus Christ. Both chambers are airy with high ceilings. Christ lived and worked in Israel. He was crucified as a troublesome truth-bringer. At his death, according to the letter of Pontius Pilate to Caesar explaining his role on the issue, there was an earthquake in Egypt which killed a seer. A priest of Apollo declared, "It is either the author of creation is suffering or the world is coming to an end." This was the third earthquake at the pyramid. After the second airy chamber, which depicts the appearance of the second envoy from the luminous heights, the path narrows down and the ceiling becomes so low that whoever is walking along the corridor is forced to go down on all fours, looking down. This depicts the near-complete subjection of the whole of mankind to the domination of the intellect which is bound to space and time and anchored in the material. Humanity could no longer look up to the luminous heights. This can be represented by the Dark Ages, which engulfed the whole of mankind and which only changes its cloak up to the late 19th and early 20th century. Of the Dark Ages stripped us of the human dignity and made us crawl like beast on the ground. Human spirits should be uprightly gazing towards the luminous heights. But gradually the corridor becomes higher again, indicating the time of resurgence of knowledge on earth. However, this knowledge shows we are not having the desire of change of heart and recognition of the guilt we were so recently burdened and for which, according to the irrevocable laws of God, we must pay dearly for. Hence it necessitates the narrowing of the corridor again until what pyramidologists may be able to calculate to fall towards the early part of the 20th century, when the corridor becomes airy again. Then an unexpected wall appears again to completely block the road. This is the cosmic turning point, the end of the period of development for human beings. This is marked by the sudden turning of the corridor into a large hall with an empty, ugly coffin. The floor of this hall is rough and uneven, with cracks on the roof. This is the Hall of Judgment. Knowing ones already know when the judgment is scheduled to start. But the measurement of the height of the chamber gives the accurate number of years that the judgment is going to last. The roughness of the terrain, the eerie nature of the whole place indicates the period of tribulation. The empty coffin indicates the resurrection of all that is dead to pass judgment on themselves and the fulfillment of the prophecies of the end time. Every large hall in the pyramid is meant to indicate the coming of an envoy from the luminous heights. In this instance, love precedes justice, though in the eternal scheme of things love cannot be separated from justice for they are one. Thus Cassandra was meant to bring a message of love and point towards the coming of the envoy that lived in present-day Sudan during the time of Moses. Jesus had to come to bring his own message and point towards the coming of the Comforter, the Son of Man who will bring the judgment. The world judge will bring his own message. But the condition this time is that whoever accepts the message will survive the hall of judgment and will not fear the sarcophagus. Measurements of some specific dimensions of the sarcophagus indicate those who will accept this word, which is very small. The condition for further existence of human beings in this part of creation is thus the acceptance or otherwise of this message. Thus the message automatically becomes the instrument of the judgment. The Hall of Judgment. The Last Judgment. In the ethereal prototype of the pyramid there is actually a rotten corpse inside the coffin. The pyramid there used to be called the Monument of the Dying Phoenix, but currently it is called the Monument of the Dead Phoenix. It is meant to receive the dead. Here is meant the spiritually dead human spirits who could not pass the judgment. The connection with Cheops. The pyramid, even with a few years of disruption during its construction, was completed by the giants and Pyramon in 40 years. But the pyramid beside it, about a mile away, took over 200 years to build with slave labor. The building started about 700 years after the building of the main pyramid, under King Neferkare. They used the leftover stones of the main pyramid, which was enormous. They studied the Sphinx pyramid for a long time. Black slaves were brought in from Sudan as laborers, and they came with their families. One significant thing is that they introduced yam to Egypt. Neferkare ruled for 60 years without completing the pyramid. He was only able to complete the base. Neferkare was succeeded by Nebra, who ruled for 50 years and was deposed and succeeded by Snofru. He himself ruled for 60 years and was succeeded by Cheops. Cheops inherited a pyramid about 1/3 completed. So many workers were crushed during the construction. After ruling for over 50 years, and realizing that he cannot complete the pyramid, he took the advice of his chief priest and broke into the pyramid, removed the plates that was kept inside by Pyramon, 70 in all, and added plates indicating he was the builder. Hence he succeeded in immortalizing his name. It took 5 kings to build the smallest pyramid, after Cheops' priest who took over from him completed the second one. My name is Uche Mba. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and hit the bell button so I can update you on similar videos when available. You can use the comment section to ask any questions or comments, and I will get back to you. Thank you.